Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, led by the newly re-elected Councilman Jim O'Connor.
Place your right hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First of all, I'd like to begin by reminding everyone, and it's kind of serendipitous, today is the Hindu holiday of Diwali. It's the Festival of Lights, and it's particularly associated with Lakshmi, who is the goddess of prosperity, and marks the beginning of the fiscal year in India. And here we are today adopting the operating budget, capital budget or the capital budget plan for the town of Islip. I want to begin by thanking the town board for their input on our operating budget for 2022. Thanks to our careful stewardship since 2015, we have been able to maintain the town's Moody's bond rating of AAA with a stable outlook. And we were able to get this upgrade in 2016 and have it reaffirmed now 6 times. Also for consideration today is the town's proposed capital budget plan, which enables the town to plan, budget, and finance capital projects and acquisitions, and allows us to make critical infrastructure improvements, repairs to protect our assets so that our roads, facilities, parks, marinas, and more can be safely enjoyed for generations to come at a time when our costs for borrowing are really at an all-time low. And that really is enhanced by our AAA bond rating. As you may have noticed when you arrived here today, Town Hall is currently enveloped in scaffolding. Our historic and beautiful building has been falling into disrepair over the years. There's been a tremendous amount of water damage. The roof's been leaking. Cupola was rotting. So we've finally been able to make these vital repairs to preserve this building and additionally to improve the accessibility for all our residents. Another recent major investment in the town is our new animal shelter in Central Islip, replacing an aging facility that was built in 1964 with one that is energy efficient, ADA compliant, and most importantly, safer and healthier for our employees and the animals. We will continue to maintain our commitment to good fiscal stewardship for our residents and continue all our efforts to be fiscally responsible. The 2022 budget is tax compliant. The town is not piercing the tax cap. And I'm pleased that together with the cooperation and support of the town board, we have been able to establish and continue our budget process. We work closely with our commissioners' requests and then tighten department budgets as necessary, making certain that each and every taxpayer dollar is spent and done so with the utmost scrutiny. I'm also pleased to report that the town's 2022 operating budget does not cut any services, does not cut any staff or any programs. Again, I want to thank our controller, Joe Ludwig, and his team, who've done a fine job working with us to craft a budget that strikes the balance we need so that we can move forward together. And again, I really want to thank the town board members. Their interactions with the commissioners and speaking with residents across the town really help when we come to that point of trying to craft a budget. So without further ado, we will consider the 2022 operating budget. And I would ask the town clerk, Olga Murray, if she would please read the public hearing notice.
Public notice. Notice is hereby given that the preliminary operating and capital budgets of the town of Islip for fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2022 have been completed and filed in the office of the town clerk at Town Hall, New York. Further notice is hereby given that the town board of the town of Islip will hold a public hearing at 10:30 a.m. on the 4th day of November 2021 to consider adopting the 2022 operating and capital budgets. Further notice is hereby given that the town board may also consider any other matter lawfully before it. Town Board, Town of Islip, Olga Murray, Town Clerk.
Thank you so much, Olga. This obviously was advertised in the papers, all the normal routes that we do notify the public, and of course, our website, the town budget, has been up on the website for the public to review and scrutinize. And I know that we've gotten some inquiries, and hopefully everyone is satisfied. This is the opportunity now for the public hearing. Madam Clerk, has anyone signed up to speak for the public hearing?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. Since there is no one who has signed up to speak, I would ask our controller to please come forward and give us a brief overview.
Good morning, Madam Supervisor, members of the town board. This is, as everyone points out, my favorite day of the year, President's Budget Presentation Day.
Try to control yourself, please.
I get very excited about this. Generally speaking, I come up here each year before you lovely folks and I tell you how difficult of a process it was and how the commissioners want to expand their roles and do more and how we have to fight it back if we don't have enough. And 2021 going into 2022 presented the same problem, but in a completely different way. And because of the impact of COVID that are still being felt, and God only knows, we all expect it to get out of it by now. Hopefully it's going to be sooner than later. But it made the 22 budget difficult and easy at the same time. And Madam Supervisor, I know you gave credit to the board, as is duly recognizable and should be. But a lot of the credit really does belong to the commissioners because I gave them an edict. They had to come in with a zero. If it was not a zero, they got a kickback. And every commissioner came in with a zero. They did not increase expenses unless they had an offset in revenue. Because they understood going into 22, we don't know what we're dealing with. The revenue streams that were lost in 21 and in 20 because of COVID are still lost. Some of them have not come back yet. So we were not allowed to really expand services. But Madam Supervisor, as you noted, there has been no cuts to the budget. There's been no layoffs to any personnel. We're able to continue to go forward as 22 will be hopefully a normalized year. And with that as the backdrop, we were able to come in, as you mentioned, tax cap compliant. The hard part, and really the only difficult part of the budget, because it was something we could not control, was the increase in the garbage collection costs. In 21, those contracts were expiring, so we had to put it out to bid. My understanding is the bid first came back with an 80% increase, somewhere in that range. The DEC staff did a wonderful job in revising what that bid proposal was going to be. An increase, which is still significant, but it was brought down to 22%. And that equated to about a $3 million increase on the garbage line, which had to be absorbed everywhere else within the town. And again, because give credit to the commissioners holding the line where they could, raising revenues where they could, we were able to pull off the balancing act. And again, can't be understated enough, or overstated enough, I guess I should say, is that we were tax cap compliant.
Joe, just to further enhance what you're saying about the garbage, during the pandemic year, and it seems to have kind of continued, the collection rate was up about 30%. People were home, it was just a whole different dynamic. So there are just so many things that have played into this, making it that much more challenging. So again, thank you.
Right, and it should be noted, it's not just the contractual piece who pay to the carters, because they have to pay to go across the scale house. Well,
Mhm.
as you noted, more garbage, more trips across the scale house, more expenses to those carters.
Also, too, we were, I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but I would like to mention it because I know not every, town is enjoying this, position, but we went through negotiations for our employees' contracts, and that was done very successfully. Again, with negotiations, no one's totally happy, but there were some compromises on both sides. But I think that, as always, we've demonstrated a commitment to our residents, but certainly to our employees who really deliver those services each and every day to the residents of our town and have done an incredible job, especially during the COVID year.
So that is my 50,000 quick view of the budget. I would like to find 50,000 because I don't want to make everyone up here false. But if anybody does have more questions or more specific questions, by all means, I'm here to answer.
Okay, thank you so much, Joe. And are there any questions or comments for
Yeah,
the
Commissioner,
controller?
how we and our commissioners factoring in the inflation, i.e. fuel, because you didn't budget in for fuel in January, now having $1, and other like salt or the stuff that we're going to have to provide. Have we budgeted that with an increase? How are we handling that?
You kind of have to pull out that crystal ball and look into the future. Side of those expenditure lines, knowing that we have to account for a potential increase in gas and diesel, potential increase in plywood and lumber and everything else that was kind of flowing through this year. So again, it made the commissioners' lives a lot more difficult to figure out how they're going to be able to work with their existing budget going into 22. And like I said, to give them all the credit in the world, they came up with that number and they said, no, we'll make it work.
Thank you.
I've got a quick question.
Certainly. Councilman Bergen?
So Commissioner, I know that a lot of people have been reading in the newspaper that local municipalities, the county and all the towns received influx of funds from the federal government with regards to the COVID money. Is that money in this budget and where did we put it, or are we still waiting for it to come in?
So very simplistically put, it's called the ARPA money, the RPA, and we're getting it in two pieces. We got our first half back in August, we'll get the second half next August. Simplistically put, and with very few exceptions, this money cannot be used for the operational budget. It is intended for, and when you read the legislation,
Capital
the federal government
improvements.
wants you to do capital projects, unless you have something specific and they have specific guidelines. But otherwise, they want you to do prospective things. It's not something that we're allowed to say, hey, we lost $4 million worth of revenue last year between interest and fifth district and make it up, I don't care. We can't keep that and say that's just replenishing what we've lost. That money has to be spent on projects out the road. Simplistically put.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking that, Councilwoman, because of that restriction on that ARPA money, we're going to see, or you've noticed that there's an increase in the capital budget, for spending, because we have the money, we have to spend it. So, and again, we're so fortunate that the interest rates are low and we've got the AAA bond rating. So, it's sort of the perfect storm for us to be doing some really, really needed capital improvements. Councilman O'Connor.
Thank you. Joe, I noticed your comments were directed mostly towards the operating budget, so I'm going to keep my questions there for now, and we work into the capital budget. And I imagine, bless you. I imagine you'll be briefing us on the capital plan as well. I'll save those questions for then, okay? So on the operating budget, you talked about the garbage fees as they relate to the new contracts that we had with the Carters. And specifically, I'm referring, I think, on the preliminary and now, I guess, tentative budget, page 275 of 298, line SR 8160, 40,010. You'll see a 22.16 increase on that line. Now, obviously, if every single line item in this budget of 297 pages went up 22%, it would paint a very different picture of the presentation this morning. But
very good chance all five of you would be fighting over each other to see who's throwing the other first.
yeah, so that's an unusual and it's an abnormality, and I think you've attempted to address it. I guess my questions are this. The garbage contracts that we contract with our private Carters with, those are on 3 or 5 year cycles, whichever. Do you know?
I think it might even be longer than that, to be honest.
Okay. So when a municipality goes out to rebid and rebid a new contract, it wouldn't be unusual to see those costs increase from the last contract, which might have been 3, 5, or 7 years, right?
Correct. Especially when you consider, when you do these longer term contracts, especially on the Carter side, they have a lot of the same fixed costs that we have, but they're locking themselves into a price, for argument's sake, today, right? Go back 5 years ago, where was the price of gas? Where was the price of lumber? Where was the price of manpower, because they do have to pay prevailing wage and everything else, whether it's on public property and stuff. So they kind of lock themselves in on a rate going back to Councilman Cochran's, question, project what things are gonna do over the next 5, 7, 10 years, whatever it happens to be. I don't think you're gonna find anybody who's gonna say, yeah, I got it. Everyone's gonna factor high, and then we're gonna laugh at the number because we can't afford that. They'll come back to a number that's gonna be more realistic. And then unfortunately, by the end of the contract, the Carter's now probably losing money.
Right.
I know in the past, when that has happened, especially when there's been specific spikes in gasoline, I think it happened after, what was that, Hurricane?
Sandy?
No, whatever.
Katrina?
Anyway, thank you. Gas jumped from, $2.25 to over $3 that afternoon. The Carters had no way to make up for that. So when they come in with their following proposals, they're trying to recoup money that truly was lost out of their pocket. So, Councilman, to your point, that is why you see these significant double-digit increases. It's not a double-digit increase year over year over year. They're locked in at that number for the next, I think,
Yes.
so for the next 5 years, they're stuck at that number. If gas continues to go up, that number that they bid on is now not making their ends.
I guess, again, I like the way you worked Councilman Cochran's question in that gas prices are going up and they have to calculate that into their bids.
Right.
So we go through a bidding process. We're required under the law to submit the contract to the low bidder. This is reflective of the low bidder or most responsible bidder, I should say, with respect to the contract process we went through. And these are increases that, as you go through this process, each 5 or 7 years, are not unusual to see increased costs with respect to picking up your garbage.
Right, and again, if you
And-
just want to be overly simplistic, 22% increase divided by 4.
Yeah.
5% increase, slightly higher, right? I'm not saying that that's, a piece of cake, but it becomes much more palatable when you kind of break it out, not to 10, but you realize it's not that, it looks horrible because it's 1 year as compared to the previous 5. But if you can kind of look on an annual basis and kind of annualize it, it's really not that significant.
Well, the second question is, we don't exist here in by ourselves. We have other municipalities all around us, and they are experiencing similar increases in their carding costs, correct?
100%. We are not unique to anything else. Carding on the island is carding on the island.
All right, so second questions that I had with respect to the operating budget. We've talked about COVID and trying to anticipate impacts on town services as it relates to COVID. So one of the things that we've seen are people aren't commuting as much, whether it means driving to work or getting on the railroad or whatever. They're not commuting as much. By not commuting as much, they have more free time. And by working from home, perhaps they have more free time, and more people are working from home. And we saw that impacted in our communities, on our local golf courses. We couldn't get a tee time. And so you see on our greens fees for our 3 golf courses, pages 6 and 7 of the budget, how the spikes went from actual 2019 to actual 2020. For example, Holbrook Country Club went from $439,000 in 2019 actual to the COVID increase because people were playing more golf and it was impossible to get a tee time anywhere, to $545,000 in 2020. I guess the question might be more appropriately asked to Commissioner Owens. Are we seeing that reflected in our 2022 projections that our golf courses will see an increase in play? And based on, from what I'm seeing, we're projecting 460,000 compared to the 545,000 in 2020. It seems like we're almost under projecting, which might be good conservative budgeting.
Right, so, and Commissioner Owens, if you want to come up, knock me out of the way, have at it, but I'll answer the second half of that first. We're always trying to be as conservative as possible on the revenue. We want that 540 number. We don't want to count on that 540 number because, God forbid, what happens if next year it rains every other day? No one's playing golf then, and now we're really putting a big hole in our operation. So we do know those numbers have been increasing. In talking with the commissioner and with Johnson Soccer, and even at the last board meeting, I believe we amended the budget because the revenues have increased so much. We actually have to increase the amount we have to pay to the golf program.
Yeah,
percentage of the revenue.
I mean, obviously, we're not doing this blindly. You and I had a telephone conversation this morning about that very fact, that at the last town board meeting, we did budget changes and transfers because of what we're seeing as a result of that. And we've done it all throughout this process. I'm just encouraged to see that we are conservatively budgeting for those numbers and hopeful that they will exceed them.
Exactly. Anything deal with weather on any of those types of revenue lines, you really have to kind of factor a conservatism approach to it. Like I said, because you don't know if it's gonna rain, you don't know if you're gonna have days like this, make it 20 degrees warmer into early December, which we've had in the past. So it really can go in a myriad of different ways, so we always try to be conservative with that.
Thanks.
I just have a quick
Oh,
question.
wait, everyone has questions.
Absolutely.
So
Councilwoman.
Joe, you mentioned earlier about the loss of revenue from Fifth District. Can you estimate approximately how much money the town has lost due to Fifth District being,
So we generate somewhere between 900,000 to $1 million a year. Obviously, it's gonna vary based on the fines that are levied. Fifth District and Mr. Attorney, correct, I think they closed March of last year, like mid-March, right when everything had shut down.
Mhm.
So if you want to run it forward from then until today, we're probably down $1.5 million.
okay. And my next question is, based upon that, did we budget in this 2022 budget, any sort of factors with respect to the courts reopening, or how is that addressed?
I'll get you the specific dollar if you want. I think we put in 125,000. Within the last month, we get the money monthly from them. And I think the August number was like 25,000. Again, I don't think court is necessarily fully opened yet. They're doing whatever they can do behind the scenes.
We're just starting to get our full calendars now,
Okay,
and you know they can shut down in an instant.
yes.
So that's almost 18 months.
Tell me about it.
We had months where we would have typically 140 cases on. We were having months where we would have, 20 people here.
Right. So this is all factors that we need to consider in budgeting for this year. And my question is, we did take those factors into consideration.
Yes,
Okay.
320,000 is what we put in for next year. Double check. And again, I did have that conversation with the town attorney. I know nothing about the law. I watched LA Law in the 80s, that's about the extent of it. So in talking to him, I know he has a better feel as to when he thinks the court's going to be open. And again, in our heart of hearts, we all expected this to have been open 2-3 months ago.
Correct.
The fact that it hasn't happened yet is the reason why we went with a very conservative budget for next year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments for the controller? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adopt the 2022 operating budget.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing and adopt the budget.
We'll leave the public hearing, will stay open because we have to do the capital budget.
Okay,
But we'll
adopt the operating budget.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, can we just take a brief 30-second recess?
Thank you so much.
I saw that. Avalon's budget is over 6%. God willing, the courts will be open. God, oh my. You know the revenue my firm has lost. Oh, and they're.
Okay, Joe, if you would, please give us a brief overview of the capital plan.
Sure. The capital budget, which is always very different than the operating budget, is always much easier to put together. And that's simply because the majority of the projects that are requested by the departments are the same things they request year in, year out. It's doing roads, doing drainage, improving recreation facilities, replacing equipment, vehicles, trucks, etc. This year, like everything else, is slightly different because, as Councilman Bergen had mentioned before, this capital budget is kind of starting to factor in some of those ARPA funds. So there's been a committee that the supervisor has been in charge of. There's been a bunch of us. We're kind of trying to figure out and understand the rules as to where the different types of projects can go without boring everybody. Many different specific buckets. We're trying to find out what we can and what we can't do. There's
So
some
don't
projects,
I just want, and I apologize for interrupting, but I don't want you to gloss over that. It has been extraordinarily difficult to get any kind of real concrete answers a lot of times. The Association of Towns, the Government Finance Officers Association, they're all doing webinars. They're all trying to get that information and get it to the people that have to deal with this on a day-to-day basis, because the Treasury has not been particularly explicit in how the money can be spent. And the last thing we want to do, and that's why we have been so conservative in, not spending a penny at this point, to make sure that we don't misspend, because then, we'll be out of compliance. We could, maybe be sanctioned. We don't even know. So I really want to thank everyone that has been really working very diligently to get that information.
Yeah, and if I could just expand on that for a quick second. The Treasury wrote the regulations for the country. We here on Long Island are going to be completely different than Albuquerque, New Mexico. It's going to be completely different than Bismarck, North Dakota. So a lot of the vagaries, I think, were done on purpose. Does not help us in any way, shape, or form, because now we're all subject going, is this within that, or is that within that? And that's why we're having those meetings. It's going to be somewhat of a time-consuming process, I think, but there are some things we know we can do, some things we can't. Some of those things have been incorporated into this capital budget, and that's why the capital budget total dollar amount went up from approximately 32 million, I think was last year's, up to the 44 million you guys have in front of you. As I say every year, just because it's in front of you does not mean we are acting on every project that's in here. There are projects that we list because we want to do. This wasn't here to do it. We're not going to act on it. Right now, this is just what we're requesting is you guys just approve the capital plan for 22. The capital plan can be amended every board meeting that you guys would like to do, and you will always have a second round at the apple, as we say, when the bond resolutions come up, for you folks to say, yes, we like that project, or no, we don't. So right now, this is what the basic project is, the basic plan is, and like I said, for the most part, it's the same plan we do year in, year out. You'll see the increase though really showed up in the Department of Recreation, and that's where a lot of this ARPA money we think might be deployed, turf fields, improving pools, things like that. Otherwise, every other department is kind of the same stuff year in, year out.
Okay, thank you very much, Joe. Again, are there any comments or questions for the controller?
I have a few, sorry.
Sure, go ahead. That's why we're here.
Sorry.
No. It's a very transparent
Joe,
process.
I noticed, you're talking about 2021 being 32 million, but we were trending, again, 2018, 36 million, 2019, 34 million, 2020, 38 million. I guess the low point in 2021, is that reflective of maybe that we didn't project we were going to be able to do as much as we could because we were factoring COVID into it?
In 2020 and prior, we were including in our capital budget money specifically for Exchange Ambulance, the new building that they're going to be moving into 100 Carlton, to be specific. In 21, that money had already been borrowed, so that came off the top. That's why that number kind of dropped. The reason why it comes back up, like I mentioned in 22, is because we're starting to put what we think might be qualifiable ARPA funds. We're putting some of those projects in the budget just so we can make sure that it stays on everybody's.
I'm just trying to, again, the jump from 32 to 44 seems a lot larger, but when you put it in perspective that in 2020 we were 38, so it's less of a jump from 38 to 44. Okay. I do have some questions on the capital budget, but they're really, I think, better appropriately addressed to the commissioners.
Sure.
And I'd like to, I guess, start with Commissioner Owens. On Parks, Tom, I see that we previously been budgeting for turf fields.
Give me an opportunity to get up here.
Good morning. Wish it were afternoon, but it's not. It's still the morning. So in 2022, we're budgeting 5 million for turf fields, and previously we've been budgeting around the area of 200 to 250,000. I guess the point I'm trying to make is none of those projects for our turf fields have been decided on yet. It's a projection. It's what we'd like to do. I think we know from our roles on the board that the community likes it when we do that. In fact, when we do it, they're saying more. They want to see more and in more hamlets. And why aren't we doing it more? So I support it 100%, Tom. But the question I'm asking is, these projects haven't been picked yet.
No, and like paving, and depending on need and how many, children play in those areas, there's a lot of components that go into it. But again, especially now with council districts, we try to be equitable in how we use
Yeah.
those funds and, take all of the needs into consideration.
That was going to be my next question.
The
Yeah.
answer is we don't have those answers yet.
I mean, we have 5 million here that we're projecting. Obviously, as we transition towards districts, I'm a powder cake. Watch out for this Cochran and Mullen. They're going to be going after you for that money, man. And the supervisor, I guess it's 2 days after All Souls Day, so we could say, heaven help us. But the supervisor is going to have the problem making sure it gets done fairly amongst all 4 districts.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And with fields, if I could, there are some fields that traditionally have had a lot of issues. They've down play time because of drainage. Those are the fields that we're going to want to address first. Correct?
Absolutely.
All right.
West Islip, for instance, it's right on the coast of, right on the bay there. There are many reasons, and we're happy to share, when we make those decisions, we're happy to run up, let folks come out, let the board know why, and make sure that we have.
I'm glad to see the investment in the community. I think that's what our residents expect and deserve. So I'm happy to see it. I'm just anticipating that, what some of the problems may be as we move towards this new world. Pool improvements, Tom. I was talking with the controller earlier this week, and I talked about the 3 million that was put in the capital budget for 2018, and I wrongly assumed that was Roberto Clemente, and he corrected me and said that was for the projects at Byron Lake. So I went back to the RFP notice that we all received for Byron Lake back in January of 2021, January 28th. We pulled the RFP and we reviewed it. So where do we stand?
So right now, we have a consultant on board, and we're coming up with ideas. We're about to meet with supervisor staff shortly on some of those ideas. I do have a sort of a schedule that I'd like to give to all the board members and the supervisor. With COVID and everything else, and material issues, this schedule may change, but this is our goal.
Right.
And there's a number of benchmarks on here, so it's hard to pinpoint exactly.
Also, too, the goal is to make sure that we preserve every swimming season so that we're not going to be doing any construction when it's going to affect the use of the pool.
Yeah, it makes
So
it more
even though
challenging.
it needs to be done, we'd like to preserve the swim seasons.
Yeah, it makes it more challenging because you can't be doing construction when you're hoping the pool is open for our residents. So-
Supervisor will make sure that we stay on point.
Well, I'm sure my colleagues will help, right?
Absolutely.
The last thing, Tom, I notice in the parks area, and then I'll transition to DPW, is asphalt pathways, golf courses townwide. So I'll tell a quick anecdote. During the COVID pandemic, it was impossible to get a tee time anywhere. I brought a group of friends of mine to Brentwood Country Club. They had a terrific experience. And one of the guys says he plays with his father-in-law they call them the oldies group, their 70s and 80s, in their 70s and 80s. They usually play at Smithtown Landing. He was going to bring them to Brentwood Country Club because we had done such a good job there. And one of the comments he had about it was the paved cart paths, how much nicer that is and how much nicer that makes the experience. So I think that's helpful. And I just wanted to,
Money's for the other two golf.
yeah. And we've seen how much nicer it has made Brentwood. So we're moving it to Holbrook and Goldhaven.
And if you remember, this board approved over $1 million sprinkler system over there, which is very.
That was going to be my next question, Tom. You anticipated, and we didn't even practice this. We spent a lot of money in Brentwood for an irrigation system. So this morning, 6:30, I was out for my run through Timber Point. You know, I have to get into training for the turkey trot because Mullen is going to spot me 15 minutes. And I just have to come in 15 minutes after her and I'll beat her. But they were blowing their sprinkler system out at Timber Point this morning because I guess we've had the last few mornings under freezing. So I would just make sure and alert, I guess, you don't need me to help you, but we've made a significant investment in the irrigation system at Brentwood. So let's make sure we protect that investment. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments for the commissioner on any of the parks issues?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
All right.
Okay.
Commissioner, I know I've spoken to your deputy Deirdre and she's been so helpful, but I just want to make the residents aware that pickleball has become such a popular sport, and we are going to do our best to try to improve our courts and make more pickleball courts throughout the town of Islip. Is that right in this year?
We've done a number of them already, and the budget is, we have $400,000. We've done a number of them in-house. Not only are we renovating the pickleball, but we're also doing the tennis courts. And it's been a long time coming. You know, they get cracks, they get dangerous, so.
No, I appreciate your efforts, and I know Deirdre has been so great, and she's worked very closely with me, so thank you. I appreciate that.
It's amazing the increase in popularity of pickleball. I know we've all gotten requests. They just can't be enough pickleball courts, it seems. Yeah,
Is
sure.
that what it is?
A little less running,
I just have a quick question.
certainly.
Commissioner Owen, just based on this outline that you gave us with regards to Byron Lake Pool, so I guess it would be important for the residents to understand that that pool then, because of the construction work that's going to be going on, will not be opening until August 1st.
No.
Did I get that right?
I don't believe so.
7/29?
Yeah, we're gonna, no, we're gonna.
Oh, that was the 23.
We're gonna we're gonna do the work off-season.
Oh, off-season.
We're confident that we're gonna be able to not interfere with, it's a little confusing on that, but we're confident we'll be able to do construction when the pool's not open.
And there are other components, you know, at the complex that will be worked on without necessarily closing the pool to
That's a
swimming.
good point. We're overall, we're gonna get out of the 70s, LSD time with all those strange buildings over there. So we're gonna do.
It's a
the whole
major.
complex, so including the buildings, you know, it's gonna be not just the pool, the whole complex is gonna be done.
Oh, the bathrooms too.
Yeah,
Everything.
yeah.
And
Oh,
we're gonna be
nice.
Working on the pond in the back too. At the same time, we have Julie working on that as well. We have a consultant on board for that as well.
Yeah, and I'm glad,
The whole
I'm
complex.
glad you brought that up about the lake, because we have gotten a number of inquiries about that, but we are working closely with the DEC to go in there, dredge and clean out the lake. And, you know, my wish is that hopefully we have, you know, a couple of paddle boats or, you know, the ability to have someone go, you know, launch a kayak there. So it's going to be really a lovely complex when all is said and done.
And that,
And long
people that live
overdue.
there, they realize it's, you know, it's also part of the drainage system for that stuff.
Exactly. It's a
Drainage system
challenge.
functioning appropriately.
Yep.
Thank you.
Councilman?
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Good.
Any other questions or comments while
I-
Tom is up there?
Yes, I'm going to ask him to switch his hats now, if you would, and put on your DPW hat. On paving, Tom, we've been doing very close to 9 million a year. And I learned this morning that in fact, we do more. Can you describe that and explain it?
Sure. We have 4 pots of money. We have the capital money that the town board and supervisor approved, and we have CHIPS, and we have Pave New York, and emergency repair. We're able to get those other 3 items are from the state of New York based on the mileage that we have. Each town gets it based on their mileage. So we probably pave in the neighborhood anywhere between, on average year, between, I would say 12 and 14, depending on the weather and how much we're actually able to, you know, if we get bad weather, the paving season, we don't get to do as much, but it's
So-
not uncommon to do $12 million a year based on
Right.
what this board has passed.
Yeah, for those out there in TV land, 12 and 14 million dollars a year in repaving roads.
Another thing that I do.
Before you go on, just to talk about that amount and the commitment to paving, this board has been particularly supportive of addressing the paving needs of this town. With 1,200 miles of road that we're responsible for maintaining, there were so many years of neglect. and there is so much to be done. We could probably do 50 million,
Right.
100 million worth of paving.
Everybody wants their road done today. And
Yep.
we live in an area of the country where my roads were done 6 years ago, and they don't look so great today, but there are people will tell you, my roads haven't been done since the day that I moved in 1963. We have a schedule. There's a process in place where we review the roads throughout the town and put a schedule in place for paving each year, right?
Yeah, it's 4 components. Right now, we're developing our paving list for 2022. And our process is as follows. It's complaint-based. It's our supervisors that are in their area-based. And then we actually do go out and we have a PE we got on board a couple of years ago. We hired a third party that stands right along our paving contract. That's not, he doesn't work for the paving contract. He doesn't work for us. It's a third party because we spend so much money to make sure that we're getting our, whatever we're paying for. And we also look at it practically to make sure that a lot of times people complain and they may not really need to be paid. And the fourth component is equitably distributing it to the best we can throughout the town.
So
All of those components.
I guess from where I sit, and probably very similarly from where my colleagues sit, because of what we hear about in our offices, I am grateful for you increasing the paving budget for 2022, 250,000, and in 2023, another 250,000 or $500,000 to $9.5 million. And God willing, we can do even more.
One of the things that I do too, and it's difficult when we're not the majority, I'm talking politics, is during the winter, I'll reach out to our state representatives, and a lot of times they'll be able to garner with the support of the supervisor, $1 million, $2 million. The great thing about that, it comes from Albany, and we get to lay down pavement in our communities, and we don't pay for it. So it appears that what happened the other day might help us in that. It's been a little bit tough. Bill Boyle's been very helpful, and a few other elected officials trying to get some of that money in Albany, so we appreciate that.
Thanks.
Well, the paving project that was done in Brentwood from Suffolk Avenue all the way up to the expressway to the service road there, the South Service Road, we got the lion's share of the funding came through New York State Assemblyman Phil Ramos. And now we're going further south along Brentwood Road. Again, a road that just was so needed and necessary and finally getting done. So,
We actively try to get that money outside of the town so it doesn't affect our taxpayers. And Jim, to give you an idea of how important it is to increase that, unfortunately, with that money, we grew about anywhere from about 60 miles of road a year to maybe 75, depending on the year, how thick we make it. So, you can imagine, probably to do the whole town would cost $250 million. So that increase is significant.
Thank you, Tom.
thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Hearing none, do I have a motion to close the public hearing and adopt the 2022 capital budget?
I'll make that motion, Mrs. Supervisor.
Thank you. Motion by Councilwoman Bergen, second by Councilman Cochran. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is approved. That concludes our scheduled public hearing. However, we do have one additional agenda item for the board's consideration this morning, which is a resolution authorizing the supervisor to execute any documents necessary to apply for and accept grant funds from the United States Economic Development Administration, ARPA EAA grant program for the Carlton Avenue Infrastructure Project, and that's for sewer construction. Do you have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Councilwoman
Second.
Mullins, second by Councilman O'Connor. All those in favor? Opposed? It is approved. Motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Motion by Councilman O'Connor, second by Councilman Cochran. We stand adjourned. And again, thank you, everyone, for your support, participation, and really just plain old hard work. Thank you.